Grace and peace and mercy are yours from God who is love. If you happened to be here last week, you may have noticed that I was not here. But it's not because I was playing hooky. I actually had the joy of taking 4 of our 8th graders to one of my favorite places in the world, Lutheran, for the weekend for a program called Faith Alive. If you're not familiar with it, Lutheran is one of our Lutheran outdoor ministries in North Carolina, and Faith Alive consists of weekends that Lutheran puts together programming for confirmation students to enhance what they're learning and to help them dig deeper and put their faith into action. So, planning on continuing to take 8th graders, and if you've never been to Lutheran, you absolutely should, and I'd love to talk to you about it. So on Friday, we all 5 packed into my RAV4, and we set off on our way to camp, listening to a playlist that consisted of exactly 10 songs that our kids had sent me, even though I told them they could send me 8 to 10 each, and several that I added in, just so our playlist would be longer. Unfortunately for me, only 1 or 2 of my songs were deemed acceptable by my traveling companions. I found out that apparently Bob Dylan isn't quite the vibe like songs from a movie about teen zombies. But after our rainy and very repetitive car ride that consisted of the same 10 songs over and over and over again, what an awesome weekend we had. It was filled with faith, fellowship, and a whole lot of fun. Our theme for the weekend was striving. Based off of Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of us but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly? So when I read our gospel for this week, my mind immediately went straight to what we had learned over the past weekend, particularly about the walking humbly piece. You see, directly before today's reading, Jesus is telling his disciples about the importance of forgiveness. Over and over and over. And they're probably like, man, that sounds really hard. So they reply with a plea. Help us increase our faith. And Jesus' response is simple yet powerful. Well, if you had faith just the size of a mustard seed, which you do, you could say to this tree here, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Just a little bit of faith can go a long way. If you happened to grow up in the church, you may have heard the parable of the mustard seed pretty often. Maybe you even sat through a children's sermon or two, besides today's, where somebody brought in a mustard seed, or an invisible one, for you to look at to see how tiny it truly is. And if you're anything like I was as a child, you might have had absolutely no idea what a mustard plant looked like. But at least I knew what the seed looked like. And maybe you, like me, pictured some sort of strong, sturdy, towering tree. But that's not what a mustard plant is, now is it? It's actually a fast-growing invasive shrub or weed that farmers usually tried to keep out of their gardens. Jesus could have used a sturdy oak or something here, but instead, mustard. Mustard, which is like a sprawling bush, spreading where it shouldn't, and disrupting neat, well-ordered fields. And like the weed that disrupts and spreads rapidly and uncontrollably, so God's reign breaks in unexpected ways, not neatly contained by human plans or expectations. And then there are the birds. You see, in ancient farming, birds were often seen as big old nuisances, thieves that ate up the valuable seed, yet the mustard plant really attracted the birds. It became a safe place for them, a place to build nests, shelter, a place to gain nourishment as they ate the seeds. The mustard plant, like Jesus often did, tends to attract the riffraff. It welcomes the unwanted. It carries on and grows and grows and grows. But Jesus doesn't let us stay only with the image of growth and welcome here. He continues. He goes on to talk about the life of a servant, doing what needs to be done without expecting praise or reward. And in that, we recognize that the faith that grows uncontrollably into something bigger than ourselves is the same faith that rolls up its sleeves and humbly serves others. Not because we're trying to earn anything, but simply because it's what we ought to do. But how often do we forget that piece? How often do we instead do what we do to try to somehow earn God's love or to look good to the people around us? How often do we experience a desire for more performative faith, the kind that seeks to look good often without actually doing good? There are a lot of reasons that I love outdoor ministry and deeply believe that it is very transformative and truly life-changing. I actually worked for many summers on staff at Lutheran, and my third full summer on staff, my first on leadership staff, there was this child, and we're going to call him Elijah, who came to camp. Elijah was not old enough to join our lower elementary overnight program quite yet, but we knew that he would soon, and he was at camp with his guardian that week. And so the program directors decided to let him spend some time with the lower elementary group. One particular day, he was sitting with that age group for lunch. And that day happened to be my favorite day at Lutheran, Taco Monday. I know what you're thinking. I am very thrilled to share with you all that our youth have informed me that Taco Day is finally actually on Tuesdays at Lutheran. But back in my day, it was Mondays. So Taco Monday, Elijah is sitting at a table where a first-year counselor, bless her soul, thought it would be a good idea to give the 2 extra churros to the first 2 kids to ask for them. Elijah was one of the 2, but before he or the other lucky little girl could take a bite, he said, "Wait, this isn't right." And he started to break off pieces of his churro and share it with the other kids at the table. The other lucky little girl looked at him like he was a little crazy, and then she started to do the same thing. I don't think Elijah shared his churro because he thought it would make God love him anymore. And I also don't think that he did it as an act of performative kindness to make himself look better. He simply saw something didn't seem right. And so he acted on kindness. And the children and the staff around him were blessed to experience Christ in that moment. And so through the words of Jesus himself and through the actions of some of our very best teachers of the gospel, little children, we're reminded that it's not always about us. It's not some competition to see who can be Jesus' #1 warrior, who can study their Bible the best, or who can save the most souls. Because it's not like we have the power to save ourselves, yet alone anyone else. No, we just do what we ought to do. And we do justice, and we love kindness, and we walk humbly. We show up, friends, even with mustard seed-sized faith. We trust that God will work through it. And here's the beautiful part. Even that teeny tiny seed, even those ordinary mundane acts of faithfulness turn into something far bigger than we could ever imagine. It grows and grows and grows. And maybe it's going to welcome the riffraff. the people the world would rather keep out. Maybe it will upset some systems or plans, breaking into places that prefer order and control and predictability. Maybe it'll feel a little all-consuming, because God's kingdom tends to spread like that, creeping ever so beautifully into every corner of our lives. And in that messy, unpredictable, mustard plant kind of way, God's kingdom takes root right here, in us and through us. Not because we're powerful or because our faith is great, but because of who God is. And as we simply do what we ought to do, even the smallest seed of faith is enough for God to grow something far bigger than we could ever do on our own. So let's keep showing up. Let's keep planting seeds. Let's keep doing what we ought to do, trusting that God is already at work, transforming even our smallest acts of love and service into something that shelters, nourishes, and little by little transforms the whole world. Amen.